All right, Mara, you feel ready to get this party started? Excellent. Then we will get started. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Shared Ownership Center at Nexus Community Partners Business Plan Basics. I'm Christina Nicholson, and I am a cooperative developer here at the Shared Ownership Center. We want to welcome you today to our presentation. We're going to be spending an hour and a half together today. This is part of an 8-part series that we've put together here at the Shared Ownership Center to support community members who are interested in building a stronger business plan, be that as part of a cooperative business model. Um, we are doing this in partnership with the City of St. Paul as part of our local program, and we'll talk more about that later on today. But the majority of our focus today is just going to be on business plan fundamentals. So whether you're interested in starting a cooperative business or you want to just have a more rigorous business plan, this is a great place to start. And our goal today is really to do some foundational knowledge sharing. So we're going to start today with some introductions, do some light housekeeping, talk a little bit about cooperatives and ground us in some fundamentals. And then I'm going to turn it over to one of our consultants, Mara O'Neill, to walk you through some really fantastic business planning basics. So to get started today, oh, we got some more folks coming in. That's great. To get started today, we're going to talk a little bit about our agenda. So as I mentioned, we'll do introductions. We're going to have a brief overview of cooperatives. My background is in cooperatives, and so as part of the Shared Ownership Center, that is our work here at Nexus. So I'm going to give a little overview of what we mean when we talk about cooperatives. Mara is going to spend the majority of our time today talking about business plan basics. We will have some time for questions during the presentation, and then we've reserved time at the end so that we can dig into some of the material together as well. As part of those basics, we're going to talk about some key ingredients of projections and cash flow. Again, setting aside time at the end for questions and answers. And then we'll just give you some information about some upcoming webinars as well. So the Shared Ownership Center here at Nexus is a team of consultants, and we support Black, Indigenous, and people of color by developing real estate, investment cooperatives, and worker-owned cooperatives. So that's the work we do at the Shared Ownership Center. Our mission is to build community wealth through democratically owned enterprises that broadly share economic and social benefits. This is our team. So Benjamin Tsai is the director of the Shared Ownership Center. Benjamin focuses primarily in real estate investment cooperatives. As I mentioned, I'm Christina. I work as a cooperative developer in the Worker Ownership Initiative. Diana is also here with us today, and she's going to be helping us by monitoring the chat and facilitating questions that may come up during the training. And then Patty Biafra is also going to be with us today, supporting us with good mojo and some insights if a particular question comes up that she can support us on. And she is the director of the Worker Ownership Initiative. So thank you for joining us today. And then Mara, would you like to just come off mute and introduce yourself briefly?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Christina. Again, my name is Mara O'Neill, and I'm currently an independent consultant working with Nexus and other community development nonprofits. I've spent many, many years working with small businesses, providing technical assistance, helping them get financing to either start, expand their businesses, or expand their businesses. I've also set up and managed revolving loan funds for nonprofits that do loans for small businesses in the community. And I've also been a trainer with neighborhood development centers 12-week entrepreneur planning class. So I have that experience as well. And I'm glad to be part of this workshop.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mara. We appreciate having you here, and we really appreciate your expertise. So we want to do introductions for everyone that's here today. We know that folks are joining us as we continue in the class. And so what we were hoping to do is if folks could introduce themselves in the chat, your name, preferred pronouns, if you prefer to share. And then I've asked Diana, if you all have particular questions that you're hoping to get answered today, either about cooperatives or business planning. If you could share those in the chat, that would be terrific. And so our goal today is we're going to collect those questions. Deanna has built a parking lot, and we want to make sure that we get those questions answered today. If we don't get the questions answered over the course of the material we present, then we've set aside about half an hour at the end of the presentation. We're going to pull those questions out of the parking lot, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered before you leave today to the best of our ability. Um, in terms of ground rules for the day, the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we're hoping that we can strike a balance in terms of our presentation. And what I mean by that today is this. We are going to walk you through business planning, and like most material, there are some pieces of information or some phrases that are specific to this kind of training. So if there are terms or kinds of information that are unfamiliar to you, or you want to know about a specific term or a specific way something's laid out, we ask that you just put a question in the chat, and we've asked Deanna to just interrupt us and ask the question. So we want to strike a balance between making sure that you get a question answered in real time so that you can continue to absorb the information and it feels accessible to you. If there is a concept or you have a particular question about your business or something that you're trying to develop and it's more detailed or nuanced, those questions are what we've set aside the last half hour for, so we can spend a little time unpacking your particular business or your particular opportunity that you need a little more back and forth with us, so that maybe we can support you in trying to understand that particular opportunity. So we're kind of doing both. Interrupt during the presentation so there's a particular piece of information you want to get. If it's a concept or something you want to dig in on a little more, we'll do that at the end. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish today and to strike a balance. And again, we have about an hour and a half, and PowerPoints can get long, but we are also hoping that there's enough valuable information in this material that we can hold your attention. So with that, we're going to get started. All right. So just as an overview, we have this information at the end as well, but this is the first webinar. So the other webinars coming up are Business Plan Basics is today, Creating Your Cooperative is April 24th. Then we get into more details around business financials. We're going to talk about co-op conversions. So those are businesses that already exist that transition from a traditional business to a cooperative model. Then we're going to move from business financials into the specifics of projections and sources and uses. We'll talk at a high level today about what some of those terms mean. Webinar 6 is access to capital. So once you have your business idea down, how do you obtain the funds to get your business started? And then we're going to wrap up with information about a St. Paul project that we're working on in partnership with the city of St. Paul called the Local Fund. So I'll tell you a little bit, as I said, about that fund at the end of today's presentation, but we have a webinar dedicated to it at the end of June, where we'll give much more detail about that. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what cooperatives are today before we get into broad level business basics. So to familiarize everyone with some general terms, so cooperatives, for folks who don't know, are generally for-profit businesses, and they can be any kind of business. They're owned by the members that use the cooperative to provide them a service. The members benefit from the services provided either through potential discounts or profit sharing. And then the members who own the business or contribute to the business have a vote in how the co-op is governed. So to give you some examples about kinds of cooperatives, they can be farmer co-ops, they can be financial co-ops. So credit unions are the most traditional financial co-op. They can be consumer co-ops, so retail co-ops. We have a number of them here in the Twin Cities, Mississippi Market, Seward, the Wedge. They can be real estate cooperatives, so businesses owning a shopping mall together. For example, we have ACER, which is the African Center for Education and Resources. that's up in the Brooklands. They own their own shopping mall together, and that is a cooperatively owned strip mall here in the Twin Cities. Or they can be worker-owned cooperatives. So Happy Earth Cleaning is an example of a worker-owned cooperative here in the Twin Cities, and it's a house cleaning service that's owned by the employees who run the housekeeping service. So there's a number of different kinds of businesses, as you can see here, that can be cooperatively owned. So one of the unique features about cooperatives is that they are both democratically owned and controlled. So the members, the owners, they own the co-op, they share in the profits of the cooperative, and then they understand how the cooperative is performing financially. And they also have responsibility for how the cooperative is performing financially. They also control the business through governance. So think of them as the board, the shareholders. So they each have one controlling vote as members. They elect the board and then they vote on critical decisions that are defined in the bylaws, which they also write. So that's kind of at a high level an overview of cooperatives. So basically, you are the owner, you are the CEO, and you are the worker. If it's a worker-owned cooperative, if it's a credit union, for example, you're a member of the credit union, you keep your money in the credit union, and you can run for the board of that credit union. So it is very much the small d democratic model that so many of us are looking for and talk about in our day-to-day lives, right? And that's one of the reasons that we're so committed to the work that we do to bring that democratically controlled economy, right, to our day-to-day lives. So with that, we're going to get into business plan basics today. And so I'm really excited to bring Mara on, and I'm going to turn the slides over to you. Mara, take it away with business plan basics.
Okay, thank you, Christina. So today, everyone, we're going to have the opportunity to understand a little bit more about the importance of business planning. We're going to learn about the basic parts of the business plan and then talk about some of the different steps that need to be done to gather the information and get started on the plan. And then we'll have some time for questions as well. Next slide, please. So what is a business plan? It's basically a written document that describes the nature of the business and the operations, the industry the business is in, the market, competition, your marketing strategies, the experience of the owners and managers, and then finally, the financial components of the business plan of the business, including financial projections. Next slide. So who is the audience for the business plan? Well, the primary audience is really the business owner or the business owners, because the process of researching the business plan and writing it helps the owners really more fully understand what it takes not only to start the business, but also to operate it going forward, to try to ensure that it will be as successful as possible. However, even though the owners are really the primary audience, sometimes if you need to get any kind of financing from a lender, whether that's a regular bank, a credit union, or a nonprofit community lender, they're going to want to see a business plan. So you might need to tailor it a little bit for that particular audience. But you should never forget that the primary audience is the owner. Next slide, please. So what are the main parts of the business plan? Basically, it is these 7 parts: the executive summary, the description of the business, the location, industry analysis, the description of the market, management and operations, and then finally the financial plan and projections. One tip that I have about writing the business plan is to do the executive summary last. That'll just make it flow so much better. And there'll be some attachments that you'll want to include again in your plan. And so we're kind of going to go through each of these sections as we go forward in this workshop. Next slide. So the first part is the business description, and that's really where you're telling the story about your business. If you're a startup, you're going to talk about why this business is important to you. Why do you want to start the business? If you're already in business, you want to talk about, well, what have you accomplished so far? What is your business doing? So you want to give a brief overview of the business so that a reader can understand what it is that you're doing. And you definitely want your lender, potential lender, to understand what it is that you're about. You want to provide a description of the products and or services that the business provides. And if you're going to start a food business or have a food business like a restaurant, a cafe, coffee shop, food truck, something like that, you really want to include the menu that you're going to be offering as part of the attachments for sure. You also want to have a mission statement. We'll talk more about this later as well. And you want to talk a little bit about your business structure. How do you want to set it up? Do you want to be a corporation, a limited liability company, a sole proprietorship, a cooperative? It's not that you have to have that formed if you're a startup business already. We just want to have some idea. Your lender will want to have some idea. You want to have thought through the process of what will it be like? What type of structure are you thinking about? There's lots of resources you can check to figure out what might be good, but you want to at least talk about that. You also want to mention if you're required to have any licenses. And depending upon the business, if you're a food business, construction, there's some other businesses, you'll either need to have some type of state license or city license in order to operate. And you want to be sure you've done your research and have described what that license is and what you need to do to be able to apply for it. You want to talk about your business hours. Now, for some businesses, it doesn't matter if you're a consultant or working out of your home. You don't necessarily have to worry about that. But if you're a retail operation, a manufacturer, or a coffee shop, something like that, those business hours are very important. You want to talk about them because that's going to tie into some other aspects of the business that we'll talk about later in terms of the planning. And you also want to talk about the terms of sales, which can be really important. In other words, do people pay you right away? Like a retail store, you go in, you buy the product, you pay right away. It's basically a cash business, but some businesses are different. If you're doing home health care, you're providing the service first, paying all your bills, and then you're billing insurance or Minnesota assistance at a later time. So we'll want to know about that because some of the rest of the business plan will tie into that. And then finally, you'll want to have a list of business goals, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. All right, next slide, please.
Mara, I did just want to point out your tip
Yes.
two, because I
Yeah.
think that's a good tip, which
Excellent. Please.
is
Thank you.
they don't need to spend a bunch of money on business plan software.
No.
Okay.
And definitely not, and I would reiterate that I can tell when a business plan is done with the software, because the software forces you to do it their way, and it's not necessarily a way that I think is organic and that it makes sense for somebody starting their own unique business. You want to be able to structure the business plan in a way that makes sense for you. The software forces you to do it the way the software wants it to do. And you should control that, not the software, in my opinion.
There you go.
Thank you, Christina.
Mhm. All right.
Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is the mission statement, which is actually a very important part of the business plan. And it basically asks the questions, what will you do? How will you do it? Who are you going to do it for? And what value are you bringing to your customers? In other words, what problem are you solving for them? And so everything that you do, it kind of tells you why your business exists. What's the purpose of it? And it also forces you to start thinking right now about your business from your customer's point of view. And we're not trying to solve like all the world's crisis here. We're really just trying to figure out how can you bring value to your customer. And I'll give you a suggestion. We're kind of going to follow a coffee shop along the way as we talk about business planning basics. And I think about, a coffee shop serves coffee. Isn't that the reason why it exists? And it's like, I think it can be so much more. And I'll use an example of Golden Time Coffee Shop, which used to be located on Selby Avenue in St. Paul. And on my way to work, I'd always stop there for my coffee. And you go in on a Monday morning, you're dragging, and there's a line. But by the time you get up to the counter, my coffee, my almond latte was waiting for me because Michael knew that's what I ordered. And he always made me feel like I was the most important customer that walked in that day. We chatted, he lifted my spirits, and by the time I left, I was ready to face the day and I was much happier. So he wasn't just selling me my almond latte, he was selling me being able to participate in community because I'd see other people I knew there. He was able to make me feel much better about a Monday morning than I had when I walked in. So it's again thinking about your business from your customer's point of view. And that's one of the reasons why your mission statement can be so important. Next slide, please. And then I also want to talk about business goals because everybody wants to have you have business goals so that you can figure out, am I successful? And so they should be SMART. And I'm sure many of you have heard about SMART goals before. They need to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And I would not get hung up on them, too much at any one point in time as you're working on the business plan, because as you work on your research, as you gather your information and do your projections, you'll be coming back to them to refine them. But you just want to make sure that they're again reasonable, and they can be fairly simple. I want to open by the end of the year. I want to get my loan approved by at least a month before I open. In the second year of business, I want to grow 3%. So they, again, very simple. And again, they will evolve as you do your plan. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to spend a little time on location because I've seen this become a problem with businesses at some point in time. So, and I want to talk a little bit about leases and some other things related to that. One of the things that I would be asked is like, what if I'm a startup business? And let's say I'm starting a coffee shop. I don't know where my location is going to be. What do I do then? Well, what you want to do is to figure out, well, what are the 2 or 3 neighborhoods or areas that you think you might want to open up that coffee shop or that restaurant or that retail store, or that manufacturing operation. So what you want to do is you want to drive around that area. Who are the neighbors going to be? Business neighborhoods. What other coffee shops or comparable businesses are in that area that I want to be concerned about? What types of space are available? Maybe I should drive around with a broker and look at some spaces to see what's the rent that's being charged. How much work do they need? And so then you talk about those 3 different neighborhoods in your plan and what you've learned about them. And then when you're finally ready to sign a lease and you've picked an actual address, then you come back and you can update your business plan in literally a matter of minutes. The other thing you want to think about are lease terms and become a little bit familiar about what that means. For example, if you do need to get a loan to help start your business or expand it, your lender is going to want to make sure that the term of your lease, how long you can be in there, including any options to renew that lease, are long enough so you can operate and pay your loan off. But you, on the other hand, want to be a little bit, you don't necessarily want to have a 10-year term for your lease because what happens if the business doesn't work out? You don't want to have to pay rent for 10 years if you're not there. So there's this balance there, and that's why we have renewal options. So if everything's going well, you can renew extra time. So you kind of want to think about what your needs might be for that. You also want to figure out who's paying for any improvements, leasehold improvements that you have to do in the space. And usually it's you, the tenant. Sometimes the landlord you can negotiate, but you gotta, remember that it's probably you. If a window breaks, who pays for that? It's probably you, but you kind of want to look at the lease to make sure you understand that. And I also want to talk about rent for a minute, because this is where people can get, you're not necessarily talking the same language as your landlord, potential landlord, and you want to be sure you're both on the same page. So there's something called gross rent. And then there's something that I've mentioned here, and I'll talk about that in a second here, base rent, something called CAM, and real estate taxes. And let me kind of start talking about that. So let's say you're talking to a landlord and they say, and you're looking at a 1,200 square foot piece of a space, and he'll say, hey, or she, I'm going to charge you $16 a square foot for this. And you do the math and you realize that's $1,600 a month. Okay, I can afford that. And if it's a gross rent, that's probably all your rent is going to cost. You don't have to pay for anything else except maybe electricity and except, your internet and phone. But then you talk to another landlord and he'll say, or she'll say, yeah, your base rent is $16 a square foot also. And you're thinking, oh, these are comparable. But that's base rent. And then your landlord might say, well, you have to pay your share of real estate taxes. You have to pay your share of CAM. And CAM is common area maintenance. So all the snow shoveling that the landlord has to do, all the parking lot plowing, the fixing up, the cleaning of the hallways and the common bathrooms, you get to pick up your share of that as well. And suddenly that $16 base rent, you're adding $4 a square foot for real estate taxes and $5 a square foot for CAM. And suddenly, instead of paying $1,600 a month, you're paying $2,500 a month. And you just need to be aware of that. And you might say, well, that's only $900 a month. I'll be able to make that up. But that might mean 9,000 more in sales. So again, I just want to be cautious that when you're looking at spaces and talking to landlords, you're talking the same language. The last thing I'm going to say about leases is do not sign a lease until you have all of this is if you're a startup, if you have all until you have all your money in place and committed and approved. So I can't tell you how many businesses I've seen over the years. They signed a lease, didn't have their money, and it took them 6 months to get their financing together. And it was if they took that $2,000 a month or 16 or whatever and threw it into the Mississippi River for all the good that it did. So there's always a better space that will come up. Don't sign a lease until you have your funds. So I'll put my soapbox back, but I just want to make sure that this is unfortunately more common a mistake than you would expect to see. All right.
Hey, Mara, we had a question I think would
Yes.
help with context. So Vanessa asked what phase in the co-op development process would be best to do this business planning, before or after forming the board or core members at a different point?
I would let Christina weigh in on that, but I think certainly when there is a board or pretty close to the board, or you've got some draft documents, not necessarily your finalized ones, but your draft. But Christina, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, you would want your entity to have formed so that you all are approaching your decisions around a business location together because you're going to want to be thinking about your financing, right? Your business plan as an entity. So you're going to want to have a team together then. And typically, if you're going to go after any financing, they're going to want to see your business plan. They're going to want to know who on your board has expertise in particular areas of your business. And so they're going to want to understand what expertise you're bringing to your project. So I would say yes, after your board is formed, you have your bylaws. Typically, as you can even be formed at the Secretary of State level. So I think you could have a loose idea, but in terms of forming your full business plan and thinking about financing, I'd want to have those key players in place before you did that. Would you add anything, Patty?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think sometimes it's a simultaneous process.
Mhm.
You also, depending on where you are, right? If you're
Mhm.
already in business and you just haven't written a business plan, you can start your co-op, or create your bylaws. But if you're very early on, you want to give your business a little more shape before you commit to becoming a cooperative or before you commit to incorporating. So that you want to work them simultaneously at the very least.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. Great. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Mhm.
All right, next slide, please. All right. So as you've probably figured, this is starting to get complicated. So now what do you do? Well, I started this process so long ago that all we had was 3-ring binders, basically to put all your materials and notes in. But I know there are now electronic binders and Google Drives and Google Docs that you can folders that you can put things in. So however you like to keep things, make sure you get whatever the equivalent of a 3-ring binder is for you and put your materials in there. You also want to break the work into small, manageable steps so you don't become overwhelmed. Think about the next three steps you're going to take. Do those, look up, see if you're kind of approaching your goal, and kind of hunker down on the next 3 steps. And always keep a list of questions so you don't get lost in the process. Next slide, please. And again, what goes into that 3-ring binder, whether physical or virtual? All of your research about your competitors. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Information about all the locations you've looked at, the good, the bad, and the ugly, just so you can keep that context. Notes for each section of the business plan. Any price estimates or catalog pages for equipment you'll need. Any supporting documents. Just put it all in there because you never know when you're going to need it, either for reference or to attach to the business plan. Next slide, please. So one thing I do want to really point out is that, we're kind of going through the business plan like in a linear fashion, like section 1, section 2, section 3, but how you write it is really a lot different. It's more of a spiral, meaning you'll come back to pieces that you started a while ago, but then you'll do more research and you'll go back go back to what you've written before and update it with the new information. So you just kind of have to let go of that it's a spiral. You'll be working on sections more than once. Write down what you know now so you don't, and keep track of your questions and get help from the many resources that are out there. And then the thing is, if you get stuck, because you will, so if you get stuck at one section, put it aside and then just work on a section that you know, even if it's 2 sections down the line. So the thing is, just keep moving forward so that you're always making some kind of progress on the plan. Next slide. I want to spend a little time on industry analysis, which sounds a little off-putting and it can seem kind of scary, and I don't want to make it that way. And I would also say, people who are very detailed oriented might get stuck in the weeds here because there's so much to find out and so much to know, and you'll never know enough. And it's like, here is where the good is, better than the perfect. Good enough is just fine here. So don't spend too much time on here, but there are certain things you really, really want to find out as much as possible. And that's some basic things about the industry. Is it growing or getting smaller? I once worked with a typewriter repairman in the late 80s. What do you think was happening to his industry at that time? And you kind of want to have a sense of that. Are there any big changes happening in the industry? And very importantly, what are the industry's financial benchmarks? And I'm going to use the example of restaurants because you can find those so easily about that industry, the restaurant industry's financial benchmarks. For example, in the restaurant industry, the inventory costs, what they called cost of goods sold, is so, it's historically been about 30%. Labor costs in a restaurant has historically been about 30%. Occupancy costs have been historically about 10%. When I talk about cost of goods sold, I just want to go back to that for a minute. So if you're a hamburger restaurant and you focus on hamburgers and you sell hamburgers and French fries, so you sell that hamburger and French fries for $10. The cost of goods sold is what it costs you for the bun, for that 1/4 pounder of patty, for the lettuce leaf, for the cheese you put on it, whatever, and the French fries. That's $3 for that $10 of hamburger. So you kind of want to know that. And why do you want to know that? Is for a lot of reasons. Number one, it can help you figure out how to do your projections, which you'll come to later. And then when you are operating, you'll know when you look at your own financial statements, how do you compare with the industry? Are you controlling your costs better or worse? Are your labor costs better or worse? Are there things you can fine tune to make your business stronger and more successful? So those are the things you want to look at. The other thing is you want to look at and try to figure out, what's the outlook for the industry's future? Right now, the restaurant industry, because of COVID, is in a lot of flux. Prices are going up, labor costs are going up. So, if that's the type of business you're starting, you want to kind of know what's going on. So how do we do that? Next slide, please. there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it is free, and there's surprisingly a lot of information. The first thing you want to do is find out your NAICS code, North American Industry Classification System code. I've put the link to that. It's a very simple website to use. All industries in North America fall into one of about 8 or 9 major categories, and you can find your more specific one. And you need to actually have that for your tax return, actually. And so they break it down to wholesalers and all kinds of sub-wholesalers and transportation businesses and manufacturers and so on. The US Census Bureau then collects tons of information from those businesses' tax returns that kind of gives the Census Bureau information about how those industries are doing, and you can access that information for free in the Census Bureau. You can also Google your industry. There's so much information out on Google. It's amazing what you can find out about, and it gives you good information. You can sign up for association or industry newsletters, talk to other business owners, talk to suppliers. They'll all share information with you oftentimes, and you go to the library. The Rodna Community Outreach Library in St. Paul at the corner of University and Dale really focuses on and has a very large selection of materials geared to small business owners. And the librarians are wonderful and they love to help you. And you can go to the Hennepin County Library, Scott County Library, all these, Ramsey County, they all have reference materials that can help you provide this information, and librarians who would be thrilled to help you. So again, just some resources for you to take a look at. Next slide, please. So next section that we're on is a description of the market. Basically, the topics you will talk about in this section will be your target market, competitive analysis, market advantages, how do you reach out to your customers, and then a little bit about your marketing action plan and budget. So one question that I just wanted to mention, when I have asked in my career to prospective new entrepreneurs who your target market is, many of them say, well, everyone. And everyone is not your target market. You really want to focus on who it is. And I'll use my hamburger restaurant again. So you can have 2 restaurants focusing on hamburgers, but one is selling hamburgers that are very basic. They're serving malts, ice cream, grilled cheese sandwiches. And then you have one that's very exotic and high priced, and they offer lots of beer and alcohol to go with it, all focused on hamburgers. Is that the same target market? No, one's going to focus on families with kids, grandparents taking their grandkids out, high school kids maybe, and the other's going to focus on sort of like your millennials, younger couples, people who don't have kids, because they're different price points, different markets, even though they're both focused on hamburgers. So again, think about who your target customer is. Next slide, please. So I also want to talk about, like, if you're trying to figure out your target market, and this is harder for startup businesses. People already in businesses have kind of figured this out already, but there's demographic information about them, that's quantitative characteristics, their age, ethnicity, income, marital status, number and ages of kids. Some of this may or may not be important to you depending upon what your business is and who your customers are. And then there's the psychographic information about them, qualitative information about them. What is their behavior? What's their opinions, their values, their habits? What type of social media do you use? Do they use? And it's like, well, how do I find out all of this information? This looks really complicated. Next slide, please. There are a lot of free resources or low-cost resources out there. So, for example, the larger school districts have community education. I live in St. Paul, so I get the catalog from the St. Paul Public Schools every month or every quarter that shows all the classes that are offered. Many of them are marketing and business related. They're either free or low cost. You can get, there's this wonderful database called Demographics Now that you can access for free at some libraries. You used to be able to offer it at St. Paul Public Library, but now I think it's only available through Hennepin County and Scott County. You go to the library, you can use their computers and access it for free, download a bunch of stuff. It is fantastic. And sometimes if you have a library card that you get registered with those, libraries, you can then sign up and you can access it from your home or from a computer anywhere. So good information there that gives you a lot of psychographic information that you can use, again, for free. And my favorite website is Minnesota Compass, which gives you demographic information on a granular level by district council in St. Paul and Minneapolis. So if you have a very local focused type of business, this is an excellent resource for you to use. You can download the information. It's very useful, and you can make all kinds of fancy tables that you can put into your business plan. So free resources, low-cost resources, use them as much as possible. Next slide, please. So competitive analysis. Now, in my opinion, this is the most fun part of doing a business plan, is figuring out how do you compare either with your existing competitors or your potential competitors. So what should you do? If you're a retailer, a coffee shop or whatever, go visit them, observe and take notes. Check out the websites. Google has always got lots of information out there, articles that might have been written about them. Talk to the owners. They're oftentimes like happy to be able to share information with you. Look at reviews on Yelp, Google or other sites. Next slide, please. And if you actually go to them, for example, in a coffee shop, you really want to observe and think critically. You want to look at customer service. Was I greeted in a friendly manner? Were the other customers greeted in a friendly manner? What's the appearance and cleanliness like? Are they accessible and visible? What's the quality of the coffee and the food? What are the prices like? Take notes on all of this stuff. This is part of the stuff that goes into the background information for your business plan. What are their hours of operation? What are their average sales per hour? What's the, and how many customers are coming in every hour? So you just kind of go there, sit for an hour, order a little coffee and start making notes and checking that off. And what I will say is that as you observe, your thinking will change because suddenly you'll see these businesses in a completely new light rather than just kind of rushing in to get your coffee and leaving. And it will help you think about what you want your business to be. Next slide, please. And you can put together some kind of grid similar to this, could be a spreadsheet, a table, whatever works for you that has the, and I've got a number of categories of things that I would look at. But again, this will vary depending upon your business and what you're interested in observing. And then you just kind of keep a table. And again, you can fancy this up and put that into your business plan or use it as an attachment. And again, how many should you visit? I would say at least 3, but not necessarily more than 5, because otherwise it becomes too much. And there's nothing that says you can't, if you're coffee shop, for example, you're on vacation, visiting one in a different city just to see what they're up to, or going to a Starbucks. You don't want to be anything like Starbucks, but you can kind of see, well, what do they do? Maybe there's something that I want to do as well. But again, what it does is it starts getting you thinking, I like what this coffee shop is doing. I want to do something similar, or I don't want to do anything like this guy's doing because it's just awful. Again, it helps you focus on what you want to do. And again, we talked about how the business plan is a spiral. Again, what you see now might affect what your hours of operation are that you've talked about in the beginning, and it's going to affect how you do your projections when we get to that. We'll talk about more when we get to that section. So I think we can move on from that. All right. So the description of the market, we've already talked about the target market and the competitive analysis. And now with what you've looked at and the research you've done with your competitive analysis, now you've kind of have an idea of what your market advantages are compared to everybody else. And that again ties into your mission. What do you want to focus on? What problem are you solving? You're kind of getting a better handle on that as well. And so that's all tying in. One other thought that I have too is like, I want to give an example of childcare. I did a lot of work with childcare centers over the years. And if you think about childcare centers, what do they always say? We offer the best care, the safest care, the most whatever care. It's always the best, the best, the best, because what else are they going to say? Yeah, our case is we're okay, we're adequate, satisfactory. No, you're putting your kids in there. So all of those EST words, the bestest, the mostest, the whateverists, are meaningless. So what can you focus on that really makes sense? And it could be, well, maybe it's a natural outdoor setting. I'm going to go for those parents that want the nature stuff. Or maybe I do Spanish immersion or French immersion or whatever, so I get those parents. Or maybe I offer home cooked meals. Or maybe we do baby yoga to keep the kids calmer so that when they get picked up, the parents are happier. So again, what are those benefits and advantages that you want to offer in your business to your customers? Again, thinking about it from your customer's point of view. And again, we've talked about that a few times. You can see where the spiral is in terms of, how you're writing your business plan and thinking about your business. Next slide. Oh, and one final comment I want to take about mention about marketing is that to me, marketing is like, I don't quite get it. I'm a numbers person, so it feels like an art or something hard to do for a person like me. But I have a friend who's a marketing person, and she said, really, it's action. It's like taking steps. What are you going to do to kind of let customers be aware of who you are and reaching out to them? So it's making sure you do stuff, seeing how it's working, evaluating, and then if that doesn't work, try something else. So again, it's taking those action steps. Management and operations. So there are generally about 4 components to this section. And again, how many of them might apply depends on your type of business. You definitely want to talk about some background and experience of the owners of the business. And this is not the time to be modest. You want to really, you don't want to exaggerate. You don't want to, put anything in there that isn't accurate, but don't be modest. Which Minnesotans have a tendency to do. So you want to have a nice bio. You really want to emphasize your experience in the industry and your experience in any industry that involves management or operations that you have. So it's very important that you do that, and definitely put resumes and things like that as support documents that you can attach. If there are other key players, key managers that aren't owners, you want to include their bios as well. And then for personnel, it could be as simple as, we're going to hire 2 cashiers, 1 barista, or whatever, and then just have some job descriptions. You don't have to get into too much detail here. You do want to mention professional support, accountants, tax preparers, bookkeepers, an attorney, your insurance agent. If you have employees, you definitely want to have a payroll service, and any other professional support you think is important. You just have to list them because a lender will be happy to know that you have them. And just for yourself, you need to have them. So you want to have some contact information handy about them. One other thing I want to mention, if you're a startup business and you don't actually have experience in the industry, you really kind of want to get some. You don't want to just start a restaurant or a coffee shop because I love to eat or I love, coffee. You want to have some experience as a barista or as a manager. And so it could be that you get a little bit of a side job doing these things if that's not where what your experience is, just so you kind of know the industry a little bit better.
So,
Next. Yes.
Mara, I'm going to ask this question because I think for folks who are entrepreneurs but just starting out, the idea of where do you start to look for an accountant or an
Ah,
attorney or an
yeah.
insurance agent? I mean, what planet do these people live on, and how do I start finding them? Can you give
Yeah.
folks some suggestions?
Yes, I do. I mean, first of
Okay.
all, you try to talk to other people who are in business. Who do they use? Are they happy with them? So that's number one, references. Because they all are, these are professions. They can't be talking about your business to somebody else and vice versa. So they're going to keep it confidential. You don't have to worry about that. One organization I would recommend is Legal Corps. They are a nonprofit organization that does help with small businesses, especially people who don't have a lot of resources. They can help with transactional stuff for free, pro bono, to help get set up or to, have help you with transactional sorts of things. But there might be attorneys there that have room and that can also become their attorney, the small business owner's attorney that you just use when you need them. So again, that would be a good resource. And again, talking to other people in businesses for who do they use. And you can even Google small business attorneys and see who you come up with and what reviews are they getting. And that could be a good place to start as well.
Yep. And if you're in Minneapolis, there's BTAP and CTAP. So Minneapolis has a program, Business Technical Assistance Program or Cooperative Technical Assistance Program. Both those programs offer up to 50 hours of free technical assistance and can put you in touch with attorneys, marketing folks, accountants. So that's another resource as well. And so there are some resources out there that can be helpful and free of charge, at least to meet folks. So just to help you all think about how you can access some of these resources if these aren't folks that you've been in touch with before. So great. Okay, thanks, Mara.
Yep, and thanks for mentioning the BTAP program and Hennepin Elevate. Because there are excellent resources on there. There's actually a very good bookkeeping service on there. And again, if you're in Hennepin County, you get it for free, but maybe you could, talk to them about doing, being your bookkeeper or accountant. So, and again, shop around, get rates. So excellent idea. Next slide. So we are getting to the end here. So now we're going to talk about, the fun stuff that everybody loves. Financial plan and projections. So, and I say that somewhat facetiously because sometimes this is the part that scares people the most. But the way I like to think about it is up until now, you've told your story in words and you are telling a story. And sometimes reading these business plans is really interesting and fun because the reader learns so much more. But now you're going to tell your story not in words, but in numbers. And this is what your lender looks at, and you want to try to be as comfortable with these numbers as possible. And in some ways, this is the most important part of the business plan. And from your lender's point of view, this is the place they're going to go to first, pretty much, and then kind of follow up with the actual words and the narratives. Now, you can put lots of bells and whistles in this section, but to me, there are three things that are the most important. And that is what we call the uses and sources of funds. And that's really your startup budget, what it's going to cost you to open up the business, and where's that money going to come from? The monthly cash flow projections, which are really the foundation of your business, and then a detailed assumptions. These are words now, the narrative, like, how did you come up with these numbers? And that's important for you more than anybody else. Like, well, how did I come up with that? Now, what did I do? And so that you want to be able to go back to understand that. And your lender is going to want to know that, or any investors or whomever will want to know, how did you come up with these numbers? Next slide, please. So this is the uses and sources of funds. So it's in two sections. This is the way lenders kind of look at things. And so on the left is the uses. So this is what it's going to take. Now, to get to these numbers, we didn't just pull numbers out of the air. We've gotten bids. We've gotten from contractors here. In this case, this is our little coffee shop. They got to fix up their rented space because the city is going to license them. And the city says you got to have certain kind of flooring. You got to have certain kind of coverings on your walls to get licensed. And they might need to do a little extra electricity and plumbing. And they got a contractor to give them some bids. They also have to buy some equipment. You need an espresso machine, maybe a convection oven, a few other odds and ends. Don't necessarily have to buy them all new. You can get some good used equipment. But you've got bids and price quotes for all of this stuff. You got to get some furnishings, tables and chairs. And again, don't have to get them new. You can get a lot of this stuff used. They have to do a rent deposit. We want to have a line item for that. And they need working capital. And you might ask, well, what's working capital? That's the cash you have to have in your bank account day one so you can pay your bills until your cash and your sales start coming in. And we'll talk about how we can figure out what that amount should be. So our business owner here has determined that it's going to take $110,000 to start their business. So where are they going to get it from? Well, they're going to try to get a bank loan. They got a couple of bankers they've been talking to that when the business plan is done, they're kind of going to bring that to the bank. And they figured they can get maybe $65,000. They also are going to get a nonprofit lender that does small business lending. They're going to talk to them about $25,000. And they've got some money saved in their bank, and their dad is going to lend them some money. And so they've got $20,000. So the thing to keep in mind here is that they've got enough money or they're projecting to get enough money to start their business. You never want to try to start or sign a lease until you have everything committed and in place. And that can take a little bit of time. Maybe they find that the bank's only going to give them 55,000, and then they got to go back to the nonprofit lender. Will you give me 10 more? Or maybe they say, oh, I'll give you 5 more. And then they got to figure out where they're going to get the other 5. So it's a little bit of a juggling act, but don't get discouraged. This is what everybody goes through, but it helps you figure out, and there's basis for this information. You have the bids, the price quotes, everything that supports this one slide here. Okay, next slide. So now we want to talk about financial projections, which is basically cash flow projections. You want them to be realistic and reasonable. You know, you don't want to say, oh, I think I'm going to sell 50,000 my first month at a little corner coffee shop. That is not reasonable or realistic. You want to have detailed assumptions. So if anybody asks you, well, where did you come up with that number? You can just kind of flip to that page and say, well, this is how I came up with it. And you want to be able to mention break even. And we can have a whole workshop just on break even, but basically break even is the least amount of sales or cash you need to have coming into your business every month in order to pay your bills, your loan payments, and nothing else. Not even you, just your basic bills. And then you have to figure out, you know, based on the rent I'm going to pay, the insurance, my labor costs, etc., can I make that break even? Is this a number I can achieve? And so that's some of the things you want to be thinking about and analyzing as you do the cash flow projections. Next slide. So again, I want to say this again. The projections will help you figure out, does the business have enough cash flow to pay all those expenses, the loan payments, and eventually make sure the owners get paid? Because oftentimes the owners are the last to get paid. You got to pay your staff, you got to pay all your bills, and sometimes it can take a little bit of time for the owner to get paid. So next slide. So this is a very truncated, minimal monthly cash flow projection, just to kind of see what it looks like. Spreadsheet, Google Sheets, whatever. We'll go out for 12 months with the total. And in this case, there's probably more expense line items, but I couldn't fit them all out. But a couple of things I want to talk to. So let's start with the coffee shop sales. Now, our person didn't just pull that out of the air. That's based on a number of different things. That's based on the average ticket. You know, how much does the average customer spend? $10, $5, $15? And where did that number come from? All that competitive analysis, all that time sitting in those coffee shops taking notes, that's where they got that from, or their own experience in the industry. It figures in what their hours of operations are. That was back in the description of the business. How many hours a day are you going to be open? What's the average number of customers coming in? And how many days are you going to be open per month? So all of that ties in through some formulas to get that $10,800 estimated sales. And it's reasonable, and it's based on sort of the information, experience, and research that they've done. Going down to the inventory purchases, that's our old cost of goods sold. They're going to use the industry probably a little higher. They're going to be a little bit conservative and use 30%. So that's where that number came from. The gross wages, well, that ties into hours of operation. There's another little spreadsheet that they have, or a little worksheet, where they figure out what's the hours that are open. How many staff do they have to have covering those hours that have to be paid? Do you need 2 in the morning, or do you need 1? And if I'm the owner and working there too, maybe I don't get paid, but I can fill in. So that's where that number comes from. And payroll expenses are sort of the employer's share of Social Security, Medicare, state unemployment, federal unemployment. So again, try to have a payroll service. They take care of all of that for you. In this particular case, our business owner is going to pay the full premium, the full annual premium of insurance in 1 year, for the whole year in the first month, so they don't have to worry about it again. But that's a big outlay. They have to pay their loan payment, rent, utilities, etc. So again, you're figuring out, when is the cash going out? When is the cash coming in? And you kind of do that for the whole year. A lot of work. It's tedious, but it tells you so much, and it helps you prepare. Next slide, please. So now we got our beginning um, cash of 3,000, and this is going to show that at the end of the month they have $720. So you want to ask yourself, oh, is that enough working capital? Maybe they should have more. What if something bad happens? Who knows? Again, then you use some judgment that comes up. Um, so again, this is a way of trying to figure out what you might need. The one thing I want to also mention here is that coffee shops are a cash business. Everybody pays for it right away. Credit card sales hit your bank account right away or in a couple of days. Some businesses really have to be careful about this. I mentioned a home health care business. They have to pay their wages to their home care workers. They have to pay insurance, rent, et cetera, et cetera. But they bill at the end of the month to either insurance companies or Minnesota Assistance, and they might not get paid for another month or 2 months because some of those things are very complex. They're going to have to make sure they have a lot of working capital and budget for that. So again, depending upon the industry, there is, you want to make sure that you do this to make sure you're budgeting and have enough money for your working capital needs. Once this is done and you're actually in business, you really want to kind of go back to see, how am I actually doing? Am I doing better? I can take some deep breaths. Or am I doing worse and I'm not meeting my cash flow goals? What can I do? How do I get more sales in? What can I cut? And so this can help you manage it and operate it as well.
Hey, Mara, we had a good question come in the chat
I
from
saw that.
Courtney.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So she was just wondering if you could clarify how to make. Okay, so she's like, I don't know if I'd be able to predict the average bill number of customers by sitting in a coffee shop. Can you clarify how to make sure these numbers are adequately accurate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, if you're going to do a coffee shop, you've probably been in the business, hopefully doing some type of work like that. So you've got a lot of experience already in terms of like, what you have found out by working in a coffee shop. And you can kind of gauge what's happening. But by sitting, you'd want to go back to, if you didn't have that much experience or it's been a while, you'd kind of want to basically go there. I would say, so 3 times a month, maybe as you're working on your business plan in the morning during like rush hour, and just kind of observe, just make tick marks. And then during maybe during the lunch hour, maybe during the afternoon, and then just kind of doing that, and then figuring out, well, what are their hours of operation? Does that seem reasonable for you to then figure out an average from that? Well, if it's higher in the morning, lower in the afternoons, how might you maybe do a little bit of arithmetic to figure out what is reasonable? Is that the best way of doing it? It's probably not too bad. It will give you some ideas. And you can then visit a couple of different places to see if that is a way, see what the totals come out to be, talk to other people in the business to see what might make sense. The other thing it might get you is what I would call the break-even goal. Knowing what your expenses are, because those are much easier to project. That will tell you, this is the least amount I have to bring in every month. Otherwise, I won't have enough to pay my bills. For this guy, obviously, 10,000 is not enough. They won't break even. It's probably going to be in the about $12,000 a month, just kind of eyeballing this. So again, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that to get something that's reasonable. And I think the more you go out and observe, the more information you'll get. And if you have industry experience and you want to have somebody in the business that has that industry experience that can help you with this. I hope that answered that question.
If I can add to that,
Yes.
I think um, sometimes we want perfect numbers and we want absolute accuracy. And the math should math, right? But your assumptions are assumptions, they're estimates, right? So you'll be able to tell the difference if they have 100 customers or 50 customers or 25 customers. You may not be able to tell the difference if it's 27 or 25. but you want to get a sense of what those ranges are. You want to get a sense of how much people are buying, as much as you can, so that you can put some stakes in the ground. And you can always go back and change those as you make more visits, as you do more research. But what you're trying to do, you're projecting, you're estimating, right? You're just trying to get a sense of what's possible. And then you kind of want to sanity check that, and you want to add to it as you get more information. But it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. It just has to be a good estimate.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Yep.
Patty. I think that's excellent. Oh, Christina, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I want to be mindful of time, but I'm going to add 2 cents to this. You have a couple of different levers to pull on this too, and it is where most owners pull. You will have to pay employees, but you will note that here the owner's withdrawal did not happen for the first 2 months. And that is because that's one way you manage your cash flow. When we say owners get paid last, that is one place you manage cash flow by minimizing the amount of cash you take out of the business until after all the bills are paid. So there are pieces that you're looking at, your working capital, your break-even number, and then your owner's withdrawal. So you're really looking at what are these levers you can manage so that you're controlling the cash that is flowing out of the business. And so that's why there's multiple workshops. So we will unpack some of these concepts in more detail going into the future, but great question. All right,
Yep.
are we ready to move on, Mara?
I think so.
Okay, great.
And we're just about to the end here. And so before you start, you want to definitely do a self-assessment. Is this the right time for us to start a business? Do I have enough experience? Do we have enough experience? Do we have enough money saved, or can we raise enough money? Is your credit good? If you are sort of a conventional business going for a bank loan or even with a nonprofit, they will look at your credit, and you want to be sure that you get it in decent shape, pay down what you can, because starting a business will stress your personal credit. And is there somebody else in your household bringing in money so that you don't have to draw from the business right away? And is your family supportive of you or us starting the business? Because even if it's just you, it's going to impact the household and it's going to impact the family. You don't necessarily have to share this information in the business plan. This is more for you to do something for yourself to make sure that this is the right time for you to do it. And next slide. And then our final thoughts. So again, writing a business plan is a spiral. We've already talked about how you might be going back and forth as you work on your business plan and get more information and more research. You're going to write down what you know now. You're going to keep track of your questions. You're going to get help from the many resources that are out there. And I also want to sort of tag on to something that Patty said just a few minutes ago, and that is the perfect is the enemy of the good. Because this will never be perfect. And to some extent, your business plan is never done. But at some point, it's good enough. And your projections at some point are good enough. They can't be perfect. They've just got to be reasonable, and you've got to move on. And then you can always go back when you're in business to say, did that make sense? Where was I off? Where was I better? What can I do to improve it going forward? So, and with that, I will end our discussion.
Awesome. Amazing. Thanks, Mara. So, Deanna, we had asked if there were other questions in the chat or that people had at the beginning. Are there other questions we can answer for folks before we wrap up and talk a little bit about the local fund?
Yeah, we had a technical question
Great.
asking about the difference between cooperatives, LLCs, and S corps. S corps. S corps.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll wade gently into these waters and do our best. So, I can answer this piece. Um, each state, some businesses exist at the federal level. Cooperatives in the United States are filed at the state level. And so cooperatives exist in the state of Minnesota at the state level as either 308A or 308B. So when we're talking about different kinds of businesses, we are talking about tax code. We are talking about how these businesses exist in relationship to tax code, how you pay taxes, and how they're structured in relationship to the tax code. So that is why you'll notice in our presentation, we say that you want to talk to a CPA or a lawyer or a tax preparer, because each of these different business models, each of these different businesses have different implications, both for how you make decisions, who gets to make decisions about the businesses, and how you pay taxes and control the money in the business. So it is kind of a boring answer, but that is the answer for what the difference is. You have each different kind of business has different implications for who decides how you pay taxes for that business and at what level you pay those taxes for the business.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think the person who asked might have left, so
Okay,
hopefully she watches the recording.
great.
And yeah, I mean, I noted some things that people were curious about. Did you want me to
Mhm.
share those too? Okay.
That would be fantastic.
Yes, amazing. So we have someone that is interested in co-op models that for people that do different kinds of work. They're interested in starting an artist slash creative co-op with a goal of cooperatively owning studios, getting group health insurance, etc.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh,
So
mhm.
there's different kinds of models and there's different kinds of cooperatives. So, and certainly Patty and Mara come into the circle. So, cooperatives can exist at different levels. And what I mean by that, some people may not know, for example, Ace Hardware. There are Ace Hardwares that exist as a co-op, and they exist as a service cooperative. And what that means is that not at the retail level, so it isn't a co-op like Seward Co-op is a co-op where it's owned by members. All the Ace hardwares at the wholesale level, so we're talking about cost of goods, right? They buy their material in bulk. So they buy all their rakes, right, as Ace hardware at that meta level, right? So it's a service co-op where they're able to go in and they're able to buy an aggregate. So that's the level at which they're a cooperative, right? So when you talk about an artist cooperative and you talk about a space, one model, right, is in theory, if there were artists that were interested in forming a cooperative that wanted to acquire a piece of real estate, those artists, if they were willing to draw up the bylaws and they were willing to come together and pool money together, could in theory form a real estate cooperative and acquire a property together, right? That's one option. Another option is maybe they come together, but they're going to work in a gallery space together. And so, and Deanna, maybe you talk about the one in Oakland. They could have a gallery space where they show in a gallery space and they have an agreement where they're all paying rent in a space together. And so maybe they all get a cut of the gallery space showings for whatever weeks that they show during the year. So there's different ways that you can negotiate the space. Um, and there's also ways that you can talk about how you want to share a space. You don't have to immediately jump to, we're going to file a legal cooperative entity, right? So there's spaces along the way that you can talk about.
Thank you.
Patty, would you add anything?
No, I was going to say that was a great answer.
Okay, great.
Yeah, someone who's interested in different types of cooperatives, what type of business is a cooperative, if an LLC is needed, if not, yeah,
Mhm.
I think,
So literally anything can be a cooperative. You can have a knitting cooperative. You can have a pencil sharpening cooperative if you think you can make money sharpening pencils. There is no limit to any particular business model that can be a cooperative. The reason that we brought these two conversations together today is that we layered cooperatives on top of the business planning piece to emphasize the fact that whatever your cooperative business would be, you still need to have a healthy business model behind it. So you still need to make money and it still needs to operate as a successful business, even if it is under this cooperative model. So that's why we thought it was a good idea to bring these two pieces together so that folks understood conceptually. There's no pixie dust in just saying something's a cooperative. It still needs to operate as a business day to day. And maybe I just wanted to say pixie dust. That could also be a possibility. So, all right. I do want to save a little bit of time to talk about the local fund because there are some grant funds available. And well, thank you, April. I do want to make sure that we have a chance to talk about grants. So, any other questions before I jump into that? Great. All right, I'm going to share a screen one more time. And we'll jump into that. So I had mentioned earlier the local fund. So the local fund is a partnership between us, Nexus Community Partners and the Shared Ownership Center, and the City of St. Paul.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, well, I am in my own mind. Hold on just a second. There we go. All right, let's try this. Whoops. Hang on just a second. There we go. So here's the local fund. So it's partnership between us, Nexus, the Shared Ownership Center, City of St. Paul. If you go to our website, we have an inquiry form. So for everyone who's attending today, go to our website. If you want to learn more about the local fund, we're happy to share information about the local fund. It is for folks who are interested in starting or transitioning an existing business to a cooperative in the city of St. Paul. So for the local fund here, you will see that the last training here is explicitly on applying for the local fund. So again, these webinars that we're teaching are designed to do two things: strengthen overall business acumen, bring some awareness to how cooperatives work, but also for the local fund, its intention is to help folks who are interested in either starting co-ops from the ground up here in the city of St. Paul or transitioning an existing business to a worker-owned cooperative in the city of St. Paul. To qualify, at least one member of the worker-owned cooperative needs to be located in St. Paul. It needs to be either in a qualified census tract or they need to qualify as a targeted under SBA impacted individual under the SBA guidelines. And so we have that information available on our website. And so we have grants that range approximately in the ballpark of between $50,000 and $150,000. We have a year between now and September of 2026 to provide all these grants. And we also provide the technical support to get these cooperatives up and running. And so it feels really important to us that we do the trainings, we do the support necessary to get the word out, and that we get these grants all spent for the city of St. Paul and for folks who are interested in starting cooperative businesses or transitioning their businesses to cooperatives in the city of St. Paul. So while we want to have healthy businesses overall, we're also interested in getting these grants out the door for folks in the city of St. Paul and strengthening the cooperative ecosystem in the city of St. Paul. So that's what we're working on. All right, so that is today's kickoff for our webinar series here on starting businesses and the local fund. And that's what we have to share with you all today. Any final questions? We have about 5 minutes left. We're happy to answer any other questions you all might have.
We have a question.
Great.
So if you are not transitioning to corporate, you are not eligible to apply?
Correct. The local fund is explicitly for cooperative businesses. So you'd have to be transitioning your existing business to a worker-owned cooperative business to be eligible for the local fund.
I'm not sure I understood how to transition.
Sure. So that's where the inquiry form would come in. So what I would suggest is Deanna can drop it in the chat. So take a look at that form and we'd be happy to have a one-on-one with you and we could just talk more with you about it. We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Thanks for asking. right. Any other questions? Are you all ready to start coffee shops and pencil sharpening businesses? Are we ready to go? Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I love that. We're going to start a pixie dust factory. I'm ready. Let's go. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. I feel really lucky to be with such smart, incredible people and folks that are committed to growing healthy businesses and healthy cooperatives here in the Twin Cities. It makes a huge difference. So thank you, Mara. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you everyone for joining us. Really glad to have you here. As a reminder, we have another class coming up in a couple of weeks. Please sign up. We'd love to have you, at least some of you stay with us for the whole series. They build on one another, and we think these modules have a lot to offer and a lot to teach. So we're really glad to have you be a part of it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. We hope you have a great afternoon. Take care.